To tonight's meeting of the City of Tucson Planning Commission. My name is Lexi Wellett, and I'm the chair of the Planning Commission. The responsibilities of this body are to advise the mayor and council and the Planning and Development Services Department on the adoption of long-range plans, policies, specific plans, and regulations that affect land use and development. Will staff please call the roll?
Chair Wellett.
Present.
Vice Chair Martin.
Here.
Commissioner Zajir.
Here.
Okay. Commissioner Cassidy, absent. Commissioner McBride Olson.
Present.
Commissioner Pafford. Absent. Commissioner Young.
Here.
Commissioner Ortiz y Pino, he has recused himself from this case, so he is absent. Commissioner Lucia.
Here.
Commissioner Schwartz. Absent. Commissioner Warake.
Here.
Commissioner Lane. Absent. And Commissioner McCancy, absent. We have a quorum.
Great, thank you, Dan. So we'll move on to the next item, which is item number 2, approval of legal action report from, I believe that's April 6th is the date. Or May 11th, excuse me, sorry, May 11th. I will entertain a motion for that.
I'll move to approve the minute action report.
Second.
Perfect. Sounds like we have a motion in, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion related to that? Seeing no hands raised, can I get all of those in favor of recommending this item to mayor and council say A?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. Hearing none, perfect. That puts us at item number 3, which is the underground transmission line relief special exception UDC text amendment. This is a continued item for it's quite a few hearings now. So we'll go ahead and start with would staff please provide their presentation and an update to the commission, as well as any member in attendance on this item, please.
Excellent. Thank you, Chair Wellett. Appreciate it, and members of the commission. Item number 3 is the underground transmission line relief special exception. As we had mentioned, this is the review of the proposed text amendments related to creating a special exception process to provide relief from underground utility requirements in gateway and scenic routes or scenic corridor zones. And this is continued from the public hearing on May 11th. The public hearing was closed, so this is more like a public meeting. So wanted to go over a little bit just on some background on how we got here. Background of the text amendment. So this kind of originated back in July 19th, 2021. Where there was a request for a zoning administrator determination on the requirement for underground transmission lines for gateway corridor zones, those CCs. On August 25th, the Tucson zoning administrator issued a zoning administrator determination letter stating that the requirement to underground utilities within a gateway corridor zone as indicated in the Unified Development Code, section 5.5.4.b.1.8 do apply to their project, which was the Keno to Dimitri Pass 138 kilovolt transmission line project. On September 23rd, 2021, TEP filed an appeal of that, August 25th, 2021 zoning administrator determination letter. And then they requested an extension on November 17th to allow for additional time to have discussions with the City of Tucson, but also to look for ways to provide some relief in certain circumstances related to that. On November 23rd in 2021, the mayor and council held an executive session and a study session to discuss that determination letter and the requirement for underground transmission lines along those routes. At the study session, the mayor and council directed staff to explore conditions under which a special exception process will be followed to explore relief from our existing scenic and gateway corridor requirements, and that's when we brought it to you. So kind of background of what we've done with the Planning Commission, where we've been. So on March 16th, 2022, the Planning Commission held a study session to discuss the underground transmission relief special exception. And at that meeting, they voted 7-0 to set the proposal for a public hearing. And the commission's discussion on that meeting was really the clarity of the criteria for relief and the definition of hospital. And I'll talk a little bit about that in a second. On April 6th, 2022, the Planning Commission held a public hearing. At that meeting, 25 members of the public spoke, 23 were opposed and 2 were supportive and related to that amendment. There were also 49 comments submitted via letters, emails related to that. And those were really related to comments on concerns about compromised scenic views, diminished property values, historic neighborhoods, concern about that the proposal is too flexible, and then just kind of pressing the need to uphold the intent of the scenic and gateway corridor zone overlays. At that meeting, it was a long, quite a few speakers. It was about a 2.5 hour meeting or so. We did lose the quorum at that meeting, so it was adjourned prematurely, and then it was continued to the next meeting, which was in May. So the May meeting, we held a continued public hearing at that time. At that continued public hearing, 7 more members of the public spoke. 6 were opposed, 1 was supportive related to that. And then we had received an additional 44 comments prior to that meeting. Concerns were very similar to what we were hearing before. Again, the compromised scenic views, diminished property values, historic properties, and upholding that intent. At that meeting, as you likely remember, the Planning Commission voted 10-0 to close the public hearing and continue that item until June 1st to allow for staff to make changes to that proposal. This is just a little bit of the feedback that we've received from you. Just kind of wanted to go over that. So this is from the April 6th meeting and the study session. There was, concern about that blanket waiver of relief. We did talk a little bit about that this, just this process, it's a process for relief. It's not granting any actual relief. And that it really is a site-specific public review process that includes notification and a public hearing. And then there was concern that, about meeting those criteria. All projects really do have to meet whatever is applicable to them. So they would be reviewed based by each of those criteria. There was concern about the definition of hospital, which we clarified, and then you'll see in these in this proposal has been removed actually related to that criteria. And then there was suggestion about clarifying the language in criteria I, as it's confusing. We tried to get that clearer, and then I think in this proposal we actually ended up removing that criteria because it was a bit confusing. So the following is really an overview of the feedback from the second public hearing. So we brought that back, had a robust discussion with you, and commission didn't feel it was quite ready, and we wanted and gave us feedback. So you had directed us to reconsider conditions C, D, F, H, I, and K in the proposal. And based on your feedback, we went through, and in your materials, we have an actual sheet that shows the changes with some comments related to kind of why we made those changes. And we basically went through and took criteria D and I, and those were removed at the request of the commission. There was significant concern related to both of those, and those were removed. We also looked at criteria C, F, H, and K, and revised those based on the feedback from the commission to address concerns about their clarity and hope to, we look to reduce that generality of that language. Additionally, the Planning Commission at that time told us to take a look at the additional 4 conditions suggested by the Tucson Underground Coalition. We have added 3 of the 4 suggested criteria from them. with some minor revisions to the language. And then additionally, criteria 12N, we did look at that from the letter. It wasn't included because it really, it was a proposal was related to relief within the gateway and the scenic corridors and not intended to impose new regulations on other areas. That would be a completely different process, not really within the scope of what we're working on. And that was related to requirement for undergrounding in neighborhoods for that. So just going to go over kind of what's changed for this. Proposed amendment, we made a little clarification here on the requirements for it, just to make sure that it's clear that it must be more than just one criteria. They have to meet the ones that were the ones that are applicable to it in that first portion. And then also we went through and kind of made some changes to each of these. So first two remained unchanged. And then based on your suggestions, we took a look at criteria C. We removed the with adequate setback. It was just from the feedback from you is that it was too vague. We agreed, so be a little easier to to review based on minimal impact for residential areas. We removed criteria D at your request. There's also other criteria that address scale. So we felt that it was almost duplicative of especially E as far as the criteria goes. D remained unchanged. We looked at E and added in a little bit of more kind of specificity related to E. So the concern was that it was pretty wide open. What does similar size and scale mean? We clarified that, and this is consistent with other processes in the Unified Development Code. So 25% is pretty similar kind of all throughout the Unified Development Code. So that's why we ended up with that number. But we basically said, put in the, replacement facilities may not be any larger than 25% the height or width of existing facilities being replaced. F remained the same. G, again, this was based on that the concern about hospitals and research facilities, and that it really opens it up too much, and you're concerned about that. So we removed the hospitals and research facilities and left in the portion related to kind of provision to Davis-Monthan and installations necessary to national defense. So those ones that really have that higher criteria there. Proposed H was the one that was confusing previously. We tried to clarify it, had trouble still doing so. We also felt that when reading through it, it really could be applied to anything and really made for a bad argument as far as just kind of how you review for that. So H was removed. Then it became a new H. To where we removed the satisfaction of this criteria alone. This was actually done previously at the previous meeting because we didn't want to kind of insinuate that other ones could, essentially. So we moved that up for the whole thing. And then these are the ones, I, J, and K, that were related to the Tucson Underground Coalition suggestions, those three that we talked about. The new ones there are the effects that can be expected from permitting. Any of the exceptions listed herein or any combination of these exceptions when added together must remain consistent with the overall purpose and integrity of the gateway and scenic routes, unless it is technologically impossible or clearly financially cost prohibitive. J is any new above ground utility that is permitted must be designed, constructed, and maintained to be as unobtrusive as possible. And then K is in the area where the applicant is seeking relief. The ground transmission lines are not allowed in or alongside historic areas, and then as defined by or listed in the National Register of Historic Places, properties, or districts are HPZs, Historic Preservation Zones, City of Tucson Historic Landmarks, or Neighborhood Preservation Zones. And then the final one, this is kind of a response to the presumptivity of the three criteria. And we kind of just tried to clarify kind of how that would work to where a special request that meets those three may only require one criteria for approval when no other criteria apply. So it's only in those situations when no criteria that do apply that it would essentially do that. So that's really what we have in front of you. And that's kind of the feedback based on the feedback that we did receive from you at the last meeting. And really, so happy to answer any questions. This is a sample motion should you need it, but we appreciate it. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Dan, for that presentation. Do any members of the commission have questions for Dan related to his presentation? Commissioner McBride Olson, I saw your hand up first. You have the floor.
Thank you. I wanted to ask about the comment that the Underground Coalition made in response to what TEP said about some of the criteria that they added. Their comment was that they're not criteria for exceptions. And so the Undergrounding Coalition was recommending that perhaps items I, J, and K be included at the head of the attachment as qualifiers that must be met before any exception can be approved. I wanted to ask staff about that.
Yes, thank you, Commissioner McBride Olson. So I have a little bit of a concern about that. There's two parts of this actually. So one, the concern is just the fact that I think there are situations where they wouldn't always meet that for all projects. So putting them up there could create an issue related to that. The second one is that we do have a lot of criteria for special exceptions in other sections of the code that are requirements. And not necessarily just straight up criteria for review. So it's not really out of the ordinary for special exceptions and what we've had in our code. So I'm not sure it's entirely necessary. I mean, if you feel that it works better that way, we can always include that in the recommendation. But that is kind of the reason why we did it the way we did.
Okay, well, I wouldn't want to presume to know if that's the best place or not, but I did want to ask the question. And the other question I wanted to ask is that they also felt that in criteria E, that the 25% height or width was more than they thought was acceptable. TEP was asking for 50%, and you guys have chosen 25%. And I understand that you've, that Oro Valley, that's similar to what Oro Valley uses, but when I look at the huge TEP installments on Grant Road, I wonder, is 25% really okay, or would you consider going lower than that?
Commissioner McBride Olson, again, this is, based on, so what we've seen elsewhere, but also kind of consistent with what we have in our code elsewhere. But, the commission is always welcome to, if they feel that 25 is too much or too little, to make a recommendation with that as a change moving forward.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for those questions, Commissioner McBride Olson, very helpful. Commissioner or Vice Chair Martin, I see your hands raised.
Thank you. Daniel, I was wondering if you're going to have a map of the historic districts and neighborhood preservation.
Commissioner Martin, I can let me pull that up and I can show you real quickly.
I guess my question is why NPZ zones. I can kind of understand historic zones, but why NPZ zones would be included? They're protected, I think, for other reasons than historic. I mean, they're kind of historic, but not.
So just to let you know that, and again, this can be part of your discussion as far as what you want to do. But the neighborhood preservation zones, if you look at the purpose of them, yes, they aren't quite the same as they're kind of like a historic preservation zone light, but they are based on National Register historic districts. And the intent of those really is to protect contributing structures within those neighborhoods. So that's the reason why they were included, at least in their suggestion, I believe.
And then the alongside is used, I think in other parts of the code, adjacent is more of the typical term. So I don't know if along what alongside how that would be defined.
Commissioner Martin, or Vice Chair Martin, that is a good suggestion for an improvement moving forward. You're right. Adjacent or potentially abutting are usually the terms that are utilized within the Unified Development Code and have specific definitions, not necessarily alongside.
I think abutting would be more. I haven't read the definitions lately, but it seems more like alongside. Yeah, my question was just how much of the city and where those zones fall.
Let me, I'm just going to pull up map Tucson for you and share my screen, and I'll in a second, and I'll show you those real quickly.
Okay, thanks.
In general, they are pretty much they're downtown and then kind of some of the areas around there. All right, I'm pulling it up right
north of the hospital and.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Okay. Hopefully you can see this. All right. Give me 2 seconds. I can get over to. Okay. I will share my screen right now. Okay. Yeah. So Commissioner Martin and the members of the commission. So these are basically what you would see as far as the historic districts. So mostly in the downtown area and U of A kind of area. There is a Miracle Mile Historic District that's here. This right here is Jefferson Park, and then there's Glenman Elm, Catalina Vista, Sam Hughes. This is the Sunshine Mile Historic District. This right here is the Broadway Broadmoor. And then I believe, I'm trying to remember the name of some of these. That's El Encanto, along with Colonia Solana, El Montevideo, and then San Clemente. And there's a couple out east as well, but they're mostly in this Midtown area. One thing we can do here, I'll do it real quickly. If I pull open the major streets and routes, you can get an understanding of where the overlap is with some of our gateway routes. So our gateway routes
purple
are the purple, yeah. So I'm just going to turn down the thing. There we go. So purple, basically you have Campbell that runs here, and then you have Broadway that runs here, and then Oracle, and those are really the only ones that really overlap.
Okay, thank you.
Of course.
Thank you for that, Chuck. I think that was a great recommendation to clarify alongside and revising that to something to be consistent with what the UDC already suggests. So thank you. Are there any other questions for staff related to this item? Seeing no hands raised there for that, I will now turn this over to the commission for some item of discussion. But before we embark on that and getting into formulating a motion for this, I do want to remind all of the commission members that in order for us to have a recommendation move forward to the mayor and council, we have to have a vote of 7 to something. So just so we all are aware, there are 7 of us here tonight. So in order for a recommendation to be moved forward to the mayor and council from this body, we all need to come up with a motion that we can all agree upon. So as we have our discussion moving forward, keep that in mind, that, you know, if we don't craft a motion that we're all in agreement to and a vote is made and we are all not in favor of that, no recommendation will be moved forward to the mayor and council. And so I'd like to invite us all to really think about that and what that means as we move forward into this process. And Dan, looks like you need to clarify something there, so go for it.
I just, I did want to, thank you, Chair Willett. I did want to mention that Commissioner Lane has joined the meeting. She was a little late, but she joined about 2 or 3 minutes ago, so at 6:23. So you now have 8 commissioners.
Perfect. Awesome.
A little bit more leeway.
That's even better. So with that, I'll turn it over to any of my fellow commissioners for discussion. Well, I can go ahead and get us there. Oh, Commissioner Zajir, your hand is raised.
Hi, good evening. I hope you guys are all surviving the heat. I have a, you know, I've read through this several times, and I'm still finding, and I looked. I'm glad. Thank you, Daniel, for pulling up that map of the amount of gateway and scenic routes we have is not that great. It's not, and I am still, as Commissioner McBride says, I travel down Grant Road several times. I also travel down Country Club, and there are large steel poles going on the west side of the street there, and the sidewalks are very narrow. And it's a torturous path for people to walk, especially along the school near I think it's Pima. I'm going to have to say that you know, reading through this, I am still very much opposed for allowing TEP to above ground down our scenic routes and corridors. Seeing the poles going along Grant, and what has happened, the city's looking more and more not like our a little Adobe here, but it's looking more like an industrial area. And I believe that especially down Campbell Avenue, and there's a lot of historic districts, there's the University of Arizona, there's a lot of businesses along that area, especially between Grant and say Keno Boulevard. I still believe that there should not be huge transmission poles running down that part of Campbell. I think it's in the best interest as far as the city, the citizens, the public out there, the visitors to our wonderful town. I mean, we all love this town. We wouldn't be sitting here on the commission if we didn't love our town. And I'm sure there's many of you may disagree with me, but I think it should just be prohibited for Grant. I don't believe is a scenic route, is it? It's not a scenic corridor, or, you know, they really need to reconsider, considering all the construction it's supposedly be going along and widening along Grant. A good opportunity to bury those lines. It's going to be destroyed anyway. I kind of think that TEP should do the right thing. I think that we should have infrastructure funds from the federal government to cover this, because I am sure that we have aging sewer lines, we have aging water lines that are going to have to be replaced, just like they had to do along Broadway. So I think it's a good opportunity to also upgrade our city's infrastructure at the same time. Anyway, that's just my comment. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your comments. Any other commissioners have comments? Commissioner McBride.
Well, I guess my question goes back to the department on why mayor and council. I mean, I understand that there are issues with TEP running lines through the area of that our scenic corridor, that particular scenic corridor, that where the railroad tracks are and the bridges are. And but I'm still having a hard time understanding why mayor and council would want to create a process that would allow TEP to possibly not underground in more areas than, what's obviously an industrial area with railroad tracks, where it would be very difficult to underground them. When we have so few scenic corridors, and this one in particular that where Daniel just showed us, that's lined with historic districts. And in addition to being a scenic corridor, it's lined with historic districts and historic areas. So I'm one of my questions is, if this were not to go through, the process that's in place right now would be that the decision could be appealed to who? If what we've set up right now is, if this passes, it would get appealed, it would go to the zoning examiner, and if there was appeal, then that would go to mayor and council. So right now, if this doesn't go through, what choice does TEP have for their appeal? Where would that appeal go? It would go to who?
So
Commissioner
Dan,
Yeah, sorry. Commissioner McBride Olson, yeah, so what the process is currently is that if you need relief from anything in the Unified Development Code, you would have to get a variance. This is a state specified process that has findings that you need to meet that aren't necessarily related to the actual on the ground situation and don't really apply necessarily to this. So similar to the situation on the west side on Silver Bell, to where there were archaeologically sensitive areas, and the Tohono O'odham did not want to have those disturbed. They went through and went to the Board of Adjustment and got a variance from the undergrounding criteria. So that's what the current process would be. It would go to the Board of Adjustment. Those are members that are appointed by mayor and council. And then if it were appealed, it gets appealed to this, the state, essentially, yeah.
Okay. All right, I guess that gives me the reasoning why mayor and council would want to possibly change the ability of TEP to be able to go through our scenic routes with some above grounding. Would this, what from, and I know I'm not trying to apply a specific project to this, but from what you know of looking at this criteria that you've set up, does this provide the opportunity for TEP to have relief in some areas, but not all?
Commissioner McBride Olson, that is the intent of what we've crafted for you here, is not an overall waiver to allow for them to, or allow for TEP or any utility essentially to have relief from undergrounding. It would be a site-specific criteria and process to where some areas it would fit, some areas it wouldn't. That's the goal, that you would have to basically prove it for each segment along the route, and then it would be reviewed by staff, and then it would be reviewed by the zoning examiner, et cetera, et cetera.
Okay. And worst case scenario of it being appealed to the state would not happen.
That is correct.
I just want to make that perfectly clear. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner McBride Olson. Commissioner Zagier, I see your hand up again.
Oh, yeah, that was a question that I was looking for, trying to formulate. Thank you, Commissioner McBride. So the question, it's site specific and it says along a specific route. What is a specific route? Is it every mile? Is it between such and such street? Site specific, is it because they can't underground because it'd be too disruptive? So what is the definition of site specific as far as PDSD? Because if this goes through, PDSD will have the ability to choose what's site specific and what's not site specific, correct? And that's up to TEP. Well, that's, we can't do that because it's too cost prohibitive. Couldn't they just go along and just say it's too cost prohibitive? It's too cost prohibitive along the whole route.
So Commissioner Zagier, so ultimately what would happen is if it's TEP or whoever the applicant is,
Right.
They would come in and they would say, we are looking for relief from this portion to this portion, right? And then they would really be required to prove that they meet those criteria for relief, right? So if they come in and they say that the conditions are exactly the same from I-10 and Keno all the way to Banner, and they say, and the reason it meets all that criteria, it's this, this, and this, and this. And then we would look at that and we would say, well, obviously because of, condition K related to areas alongside historic areas, it isn't the same from here to here. We would probably at that point have a pre-submittal meeting with them and we would say, no, you're going to have to actually go back and prove that this segment meets it and this segment and this segment. And that's how they would move forward with it. So they would have to prove that. And if they don't, then in the staff review and in the zoning examiner review, it wouldn't meet the intent of the special exception and it would potentially be denied.
So in that case, so it would go on because the mayor and council has to be approved afterwards. Something is proposed, has to be approved by mayor and council. The mayor and council could actually pose some exceptions and not approve any of it, correct?
So the current proposal has the zoning examiner special exception, has the approval up to the zoning examiner. And then an appeal would go to the mayor and council, and then they can basically make any decision they want. They can approve it, deny it, etc. So there is another process, and I know Commissioner Martin had brought this up previously, that is the mayor and council special exception process. So it is possible that you could do a mayor council special exception process and just leave it up to mayor and council. The intent was to, because the zoning examiner is an impartial arbiter, essentially, that it would be less political than the mayor and council. That was the reasoning for that, but that is something that is a possibility as well, is to do that process, which would also go through the zoning examiner. They just make a recommendation to the mayor and council.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Great questions. Commissioner Martin, your hand was raised next.
Thank you. I was wondering if, Dan, if you could look up 3.4.5A2 of the findings, and I don't want to quote it. Well, I can quote it, I guess. I can get it on my screen. So A2, the finding of the zoning examiner says, does not adversely affect adjacent land uses or the surrounding neighborhood, or that such adverse effects can be substantially mitigated through the use of additional conditions provided in sections 3.4.6. So I guess it's just a reminder to all the commissioners that the zoning examiner has pretty broad purview over what would adversely affect the land uses or the neighbors. So it's it's not a slam dunk thing. There's, gonna have to be substantial mitigation or proof that they do not adversely affect land uses or surrounding neighborhoods. So, thank you.
Thank you, Vice Chair Martin. Excellent point. Commissioner McBride Olson, your hand's raised.
Yeah, I just kind of wanted to reiterate what I was saying before, that possibly the worst case scenario that we would like to avoid is that an appeal going to the state. So I'm not trying to force anybody's hand here, but please consider that when you're thinking about whether or not you think that this is a good process that's been thoughtfully put together to try and mitigate the issues. Because there's always, in anything that we ever look at, there's good choices and bad choices and better choices. And sometimes you need to go with what is a better choice, but not always what you wish could happen. But I did have one other question, which is the process that Commissioner Martin had talked about. Is this going to mayor and council? So it would go to mayor and council instead of zoning examiner. Is a mayor and council review process, is that correct? Or is it set up, or is what we've put together right now, what you were talking about, Chuck, that it goes to zoning examiner, and then if there's an appeal, it goes to mayor and council?
So I'm gonna try and clarify this, and then Dan, please, by all means, if I botch it, please jump in. But Commissioner McBride Olson, as I understand it, the process that Commissioner Martin is referring to is it's a mayor and council special exception. So rather than the zoning examiner having the final say, he makes the recommendation to the mayor and council, and that then that recommendation is then considered in the mayor and council's decision. So rather than the zoning examiner being the end all be all approval, it'll go to the mayor and council as being the end all be all. I think perhaps the question for Dan is, what is the appeal process at that point? Is there an appeal process for the mayor and council, based on their decision, et cetera? Can you explain that for us?
Yes. So just taking a quick look at the code, I want to make sure that I'm correct in this as far as what the appeal process is. So give me 2 seconds. I believe it's an appeal to the Board of Adjustment, but I would have to give me 2 seconds to look it up in the code just to make sure. I want to make sure that I'm correct with this one.
Of course, we'll come back to that. It appears that Commissioner Lane's hand is raised, so we'll jump to her and then come back to you, Dan. Commissioner Lane, floor is yours.
Thank you, which is funny because this is really probably a question for Daniel as well. But is the zoning examiner allowed to add conditions through this process at the first step? Is that correct? Am I understanding that correctly?
Commissioner Lane, that is correct, yes. And Lexi.
Thank you.
Commissioner Jay, your hand is raised. Or Commissioner Young, sorry.
That's okay. You can call me Mr. J as long as you want. So I guess where I am is, I have to say, this has been incredibly challenging for me to even understand, and I have a master's in planning, so I'll just start with that. I guess where my thoughts are at this point is, I'm having a real hard time separating this from the fact that TEP was the one that started this ball rolling and did it kind of behind closed doors. That just raises a red flag for me from the get-go. Second, there was just overwhelming opposition from essentially everyone that spoke, which is also weighing very heavy on me. But I do appreciate Commissioner McBride, your point of there are good choices and bad choices, and sometimes there are better choices. So I guess I'm just wondering, from the perspective of other the other commissioners, are most people thinking at this point that what is before us is a better process for us as Tucsonans than what is in place now? Because I'm having trouble understanding that, frankly. I mean, I don't want this to be something that makes it easier for TEP or other utilities to do things that essentially I don't think are good for Tucson. You know, lots of people have expressed that. But if overall it's a better process than what we have now to achieve what I think are, you know, our common goals as Tucsonans, I would be, I would think about supporting it. But I guess at this point, just the convoluted nature of it and the opposition and the fact that TEP was the one that got the ball rolling to essentially make it easier for them to do what they want, it just is really giving me pause. So I guess if some other commissioners could kind of clarify where you all are standing at this point, because that's kind of where my head's at this point.
Thank you, Commissioner Young, for that. I'm going to just jump down the line as I saw the hands raised. Commissioner Lane, your hand was raised next.
Sure. Jay, I've been thinking the same thing that you have since Commissioner Olson actually first spoke. And I think it sounds like we're on the same page. If I'm going to be honest, again, as a real estate developer, I'm not opposed to exceptions. There are times when exceptions should be made and they're appropriate. I do not like this exception, or let me say this, I feel yucky, for lack of a technical term, about this exception for all the same reasons that everybody has already voiced. But I do think this is, for lack of a better phrase, the lesser of two evils. I think this is, to my mind, this is the right path to take. And if I had another month or a month and a half or 2 months, I would probably spend more time as a commission trying to narrow this exception even further. But it appears, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, we don't have that time today. So we have to make a decision today. So at this moment, I am inclined to vote in favor of recommending this exception to the council, blah, blah, blah. Because if this goes up to the Arizona Corporation Commission, and that's where I feel, and I don't super like it. This isn't perfect, but I fear what would come if we just left it as is. So that's where I'm at, Jay.
Thank you for that. Commissioner Martin, your hand is up next.
Yeah, I was wondering if Dan could give us a little history of why TEP had to look at this process. I think I've heard some things, but I don't know if Dan could kind of give us a history of what happened before last year.
Sure. A couple things. So first one is that I was looking for the mayor and council appeal process, but there is none. So ultimately they're the final decision, and then you'd have to bring like some sort of civil lawsuit or something of that sort too, if you didn't agree with it, essentially. So so there isn't an appeal process for a mayor and council, special exception or a rezoning on that type of thing. Second portion is kind of related to the history of this. So ultimately what I believe happened is that there was a bit of a breakdown in the review process. These were being reviewed by our Department of Transportation because they were in the right of way. They weren't making their way over to our zoning. And there was a conflict there. So the requirement for undergrounding of these transmission lines has never been enforced up until recently, when it was realized that, especially on the Kino de Petri Moss project, that this gateway requirement for utilities to underground applied to the project in the right of way, not just projects on private property. That's what sparked the whole thing, because they had been pretty far down the process as far as planning this line along Campbell. And then there was the zoning administrator determination letter, and that clarified that, saying that they were required to underground utilities along gateway routes. That's kind of how we got to now. That's why on several gateway routes or other gateway or scenic, maybe not scenic routes, but other gateway routes, you see above ground utilities sometimes.
Thank you, Daniel.
Yes, thank you. I'll voice my opinion on the matter just because I don't see any other hands raised at this time. To be frank, it's been something I think we all struggle with a little bit, because as all of the commissioners mentioned, Tucson is a special place for all of us, and really making sure that we honor those scenic and gateway corridors is important. But I agree, having, you know, as an individual that utilizes a special exception process in my day-to-day work, I believe that this is the more robust process, and that it involves more of that dialogue between the public and the zoning examiner, and it puts it in a body that is much more, I don't want to say qualified by any means, but in some capacity qualified, as he's a land use expert, you know, fighting for the best interests of this community. And it's not really a political decision whatsoever, you know, where dollars may speak or the louder voices may be heard. So I'm comfortable with the process moving forward, and the recommendations that have been suggested by staff to date, with the exception of the revision to criterion K that Commissioner Martin suggested early on in this process, to clarify that language to make it consistent with what the UDC suggests. But that's where I stand on that matter. There are a couple others that haven't spoke. I'm not going to put you necessarily on the spot to speak about it, but are there any other discussion items we'd like to talk about? I see Commissioner Martin's hand raised again.
I was just wondering if Dan could put the motion up on the screen for us. So I'd like to make a motion to recommend the approval of the underground transmission line release special exception UDC text amendment as presented by staff in the staff report to the City of Tucson Mayor and Council, with clarification of alongside in item K.
Perfect. I have a motion.
Sorry, and that's based on discussion of the other commissioners, that I think this is the best method to get this done. So thank you.
Thank you for that. I have a motion. Do I have anyone to second that?
I'll second it.
So I've got a motion by Commissioner Martin and a second by Commissioner McBride Olson. Is there any discussion that we'd like to have? Commissioner Zigier, sorry.
That's all right. It's been spelled a few different ways in the emails and stuff. It's okay. You know, as I understand everything, as definitely that we don't want it to go up to Maricopa County. So, and I understand that process, and I'm not in favor of that either. And I agree with Commissioner Young that working behind TEP kind of went around and behind closed doors. And I'm pretty sure that they were aware. I mean, TEP is not a stupid company. We're aware along Silver Bell that they are getting away with something. So I have no qualms. TEP is a company, they deserve to make a profit. Believe that. However, I would like to see, because you know, I would like to be able to follow up how this actually works its way through PDSD. I would like to hopefully, I'm not sure if it's after this motion passes, if it's possible, Daniel, that we are made aware of the process, that how this is working its way through PTSD, because this is something serious. I mean, it's like they have to, well, we're not going to, we can't underground here. I mean, oh, it's right next to the U of A. Oh, it's too hard. I don't want it. I got a funny feeling there's just going to be a lot of whining going on from TEP. If this passes and goes on, and it will, but I don't know if we can get assurances. I'm just asking. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for that. And I'm sure Daniel will be more than happy to make us aware of what the process is as we move forward. So with that, I have a motion by Chair Martin or Vice Chair Martin, and a second by Commissioner McBride Olson to recommend this for approval with the suggested modifications. So with that, I'm going to ask staff to do a roll call, please.
Excellent. Great. Thank you, Chair. Chair Willett,
I'm yay.
Vice Chair Martin,
Aye.
Commissioner Zagier,
You were muted there. Can you unmute for us?
No.
Commissioner Cassidy absent, Commissioner McBride Olson,
Aye.
Commissioner Pafford absent, Commissioner Young,
Aye.
Commissioner Ortiz-Pino has recused himself, Commissioner Lucia,
Aye.
Commissioner Schwartz absent, Commissioner Warake,
Aye.
Commissioner Lane,
With an incredible respect for that no vote, I'll say aye.
and then Commissioner McCancy absent. Motion passes 7-1.
Great, thank you. And I want to thank all of the commissioners for your thought and, you know, the time we've spent on this. It's been an incredibly robust process. So I want to thank you for your time and your consideration in this, and as well as those members of the public as well. Thank you for participating in this dialogue and your patience as we've gone through many iterations of this. I appreciate it. That puts us moving on to item number 4, which is PTSD staff announcements. Dan, or I don't know if Scott's on the line. Do you guys have any announcements for us?
Yeah, Chair Willett, actually we have the Assistant City Manager, Tim Tomure, who has been helping us with the organization, who may want to just kind of give you a little bit of an update.
Awesome. Well, thanks for joining us this evening, Tim. The floor is yours.
Oh, sure. Thank you. And good evening, commissioners. I just wanted to give a quick update on PTSD in general. For many of you may be aware that there was a conversation at the June 7th Mayor and Council meeting about PTSD and its levels of service. And in recognition of the fact that we have quite a few challenges in service delivery and timeframes and things of that nature, Mayor and Council have approved the addition of 14 additional staff to the PTSD operation. This will take us a little while to do the hiring, onboarding, and then training of staff, but it'll help us in a few areas. One of the biggest areas we're struggling is we're not meeting our timeframes for development review for permit reviews, and this includes site reviews and other elements of a building or a development. So we're going to be adding staff in those areas to improve that level of service. And then we're also, one of our pain points is in the area of customer service. Generally, but specifically, we have a very antiquated records of the built environment. It's you're welcome to visit it at any time and see the little drawers full of microfiche. And to date, what we've been doing is, as data requests come in for that information, we get it to the customer, but also then digitize it. And that's really been distracting our customer service staff from day-to-day operations. So what we're going to do is invest in a project. It'll probably take us a few years, but to digitize all those records once and for all, so we can get out from underneath all of that. It's not even paper, it's little microfilms. So it's exciting because mayor and council really recognized the need to meet the needs of the community, the pace of development, and frankly, the burden that's been on staff and the stress that we've placed on staff over the last few years of trying to meet the demand. So that's really just kind of the little bit of excitement for us is that we've got some help on the way, and we're going to make good on getting those folks onboarded and serving the community. So thank you for the opportunity to give you that update.
Thank you so much for that update. That moves us to item number 5, future agenda items. Dan?
Yes, thank you, Chair Willett. So just a couple things that will be coming up in the future. First one is the adult use marijuana social equity licenses. So as you likely know, the state has issued 26 of these kind of adult use only social equity licenses that are currently prohibited in our code, which we did back in April last year. So we held an initial kind of stakeholder meeting. We will be bringing that to you in the near future. We'd also like to do an informational presentation on affordable housing strategy for Tucson. So bring HCD here to talk to you. We were planning on doing this previously, and then we got really busy with some kind of, bigger items and things of that sort. So we're hoping to do that in the near future and bring that to you. So yeah, thanks.
Thank you. That moves us to item number 6, which is call to the audience. Dan, I believe you had mentioned earlier today that we had a couple members. Will you go ahead and just list the first speaker up, and we'll see if they're online?
Yes, of course. Thank you, Chair Weld. So we have John Schwartz and then William Craig as our 2 speakers who have reached out.
So we'll go ahead and invite Mr. Schwartz up first. Mr. Schwartz, you have the floor.
Yeah, hi, thanks. I just wanted to say I'm a member of the steering committee of the Undergrounding Coalition. I just wanted to express our great appreciation for the seriousness, the care, the thoughtfulness that you all put into this proposal. And as a citizen of Tucson, to express my appreciation for what you all do. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Schwartz. And then the next individual, Dan, sorry, I didn't catch that name.
Next one was William Craig.
Mr. Craig, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. I'm also part of the Undergrounding Steering Committee, and I'm with the Sam Hughes Neighborhood Association as well. And I want to thank you for each and every one of you for the amount of time I know you had to put into this, because I know how much time we put into this. And I know that you've been just as diligent, because I've heard the statements you've made. People have definitely thought this through, and we appreciate everything you've done. Thank you very much, all of you.
Thank you, Mr. Craig. We appreciate that. So with that puts us at item number 7. Wait, before I move on, let me make sure, is there anyone else on the call that would like to address the commission here? Seeing no one or hearing no one jump in now, I'm going to ask that we move on to item number 7, which is adjournment. Can I get a motion?
I motion.
Awesome. We've got a motion. Can I get a second?
A second.
Very good. We've got a motion and a second. So that puts us at adjournment. So thank you all so much for attending this evening's meeting, and we'll see you all next time. Have a great night.
Thanks,
night.
everyone. Good
Stay
night.
cool out there.
Good luck.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great night.